Okay, good morning to all of you from 24 countries you registered today. Welcome to ICA-Belgium. With ICA-Belgium, the Color Association of Belgium, we try to make a bridge between science, art, industries and all the different people who are working with color. We also try to do that through inviting very interesting speakers like the one of today. So what I told, we will be recording the session. You can put the questions in the chat, and I will not postpone, I will not talk any longer, and will give the microphone to Maya to introduce Pedro, and then we can start the very interesting talk of this morning.
Thanks, Janet. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are really happy today to introduce to you Pedro Ruxa, a Portuguese artist living and working in Brussels. Pedro obtained his Master of Fine Arts in Painting at La Cambre in 2016. He's also an assistant professor of color theory and digital color at La Cambre in Brussels. He has regularly shown his work in solo and group exhibitions in Belgium, France, Mexico, and the USA. Pedro, welcome, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. The screen is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Maya, for your words, and thank you to the ICA-Belgium team for this invitation for today's talk. It was really a pleasure to prepare this for me, and you know, as an artist, I spend a lot of time working alone in the studio, and even when I show my paintings in exhibitions, I rarely have the occasion to share and to talk about all the things that exist behind a painting and all the research and inspiration. So actually, when you see a painting in an exhibition, you only see the top of the iceberg. So it's always nice to have this kind of occasions to share a more intimate side of the work. So I will share my screen now, and we'll start. So as Maya was saying, I'm a visual artist. I was born in Portugal in 1993, and I'm based in Brussels for about 12 years now, where I got my master's degree in fine arts in 2016. My work as an artist is mainly painting on canvas. And since 2021, I'm also an assistant professor of the color course at La Cambre, which is one of the top fine art schools in Brussels. So for today's talk, I prepared a few images of my paintings that I would like to share with you, but also some other documents, inspirations and ideas behind the creation of my paintings. I will also give a few words about the color course at La Cambre, and we will see how this has become connected and also a very important influence to my paintings. So the first image that I'd like to show you today is this one. And this image represents a very important moment to me because it was the moment when color became literally a central subject in my work. This is a view from my studio from 2019. And I'm not saying I was not interested in color before 2019, because I've been doing painting for about 15 years now, I think, something like that. And of course, when one paints, one always paints with colors. But I was not really thinking too much about which colors I was using. What you see here is not really an artwork, or at least at that time I didn't see it as an artwork. It was a mind map. A mind map to organize all my ideas and all the complexity of all my interests and to try to find some logic in it. And so the question I was asking myself at this moment was, okay, so there's all these ideas, all these inspirations, all these images, all these words and concepts. How can I find a logic into all this in a way that could help me to get a sense of unity in my paintings? And at some point I thought, well, I'm a visual artist, so perhaps it would be interesting to find a visual logic, a visual link to connect all these ideas. And so I was thinking, how can I do this? And I had this idea of organizing all this through the point of view of color. I had at that time these Pantone color samples in my studio, and I put them on the wall. And then I began to try to associate each one of the pictures, each one of the words to a specific color. I have a little video. I'm not sure it will work with internet connection on Zoom, but we will try it. And I must say that at the beginning, I didn't believe too much that this was going to work, because I was saying to myself, this is completely subjective. It will just give a totally messy and random result, but I still decided to do it just for the experience. And the more I continued, the more and more I realized it was actually working very, very well. And that actually very unexpected and interesting connections between ideas were being made. Now I'd like to show a few close-ups of this, because there's a lot of information. For example, this one shows a small part of an area around the orange and red tones. And what's interesting is that naturally and in a very intuitive way, I associated everything that is connected to the human body, the organs, the blood, but also with fire and the fire of love, the physical love. Also a lot of things related to sexuality, to this color red. And on the other side, on the opposite side of this mind map, in the zone of the violet blue tones, I naturally associated images very, very abstract, a lot of scientific images, and there was clearly a kind of metaphysical mood, which I found very, very interesting. And finally, I realized that in all this, there was a very specific part, a very specific zone that interested me more than any other. The images that I felt more attached with, the images and the ideas that were more meaningful to me, seemed to be concentrated in a very specific zone, and this was the pink zone. So the pink zone that it's on the extremities. Now, for the ones among you that studied a little bit about color theory and visual perception, you probably have heard that the color pink has a particular status on the categorization of color. In the spectrum of visible light, which represents all the different wavelengths that a human can perceive, there is no pink wavelength. It begins in blue-violet in the left side and finishes with red in the right. And the concept of pink, the idea of pink, is actually something that our brain creates an interpretation of when the human eye receives both blue wavelengths and red wavelengths at the same time. We call this the extra spectral hues, because all these colors that we can imagine between blue and red does not exist in the spectrum of visible light. So pink is like an illusion that our brain creates when it has these two informations at the same time, blue and red. So there was some kind of duality in the color pink, this idea that it was always a mixture, a balance between these two opposite sides. And this becomes very interesting when you think about what I was showing just before, that in my mind map, I was associating a lot of things related to the physical body, the flesh, to the color red. And on the opposite side, in the violet blue zone, I was associating mainly very intellectual, subconscious ideas. So the color pink quickly became, to me, this zone of encounter between these two opposite conceptions, almost like an encounter between reality and imagination, or between action and thought. So I'd like to show you some close-ups of this pink zone. And if I'm taking so much time to explain you this, is because you will see this really became a fundamental idea for some of the paintings that I did afterwards. So pink became to me, as I was saying, the encounter of two colors, but also automatically it became a metaphor or an analogy for all sorts of encounters, for all sorts of meetings, all sorts of face-to-face images and ideas. And it became clear to me at this point that this was about human relationships, in particular love and hate relationship. And in an interesting way, this idea of encounter and connection of opposites was expanded to a lot of different things, from electricity, for example, where you have often this blue wire and a red wire that are necessarily connected to create light, but also the circulatory system of the human body, and a lot of other images that illustrated some kind of strong emotional encounter, a face-to-face tension between two elements. And there's this quote by Gilles Deleuze that I found that kind of relates to what I'm saying. Art consists of taking two things that are foreign to each other and bringing them together by metaphor, by analogy. These are not simple encounters of ideas. These are sensitive encounters, aesthetic encounters. So, in a way, by touching this notion that I had built around the color pink, I was touching what to me was the very essence of art. I was able to find and to understand in a better way what interested me and what I wanted to communicate with my paintings. So this is the first painting that I chose to show you today, which, as you can see, is directly inspired by all the things I just showed you. In one side, you have this brain that is a symbol of thought, rationality, and intellect. And on the other side, you have a heart, which does not represent a real heart, by the way. It doesn't look like a real organ at all. It is really a symbol for everything that is connected to love and emotions. And the two are connected by these wires that look like electrical wires, one blue and one red, that are getting tied to each other, almost like an embrace. In this one, we have the same kind of idea, but in a very different form. There's this electric machine, which I called pink transistor. And it looks like it is trying to communicate something. You can see that there's this little paper coming out of it with a letter, which I used as a symbol of language. And once again, there's this idea of two opposites trying to connect with each other through these two wavelengths, blue and red. And this idea of having two objects from a very different nature that are trying to connect with each other is something that appears very often in my work. In this one that I called Love System, there's another one of these electrical machines, which is connected through electric wires to the heart. And some information is showing up on the screen as if the machine was trying to interpret a signal from the heart, or perhaps to bring it back to life. If you think about medicine and how we use electrical power to intervene in case of heart failure. So there are some pictures that inspire this painting. I will not go into details about each one of them because it would take too long, but it's just to give you an idea of what kind of images I use as an inspiration for this painting. I've been really obsessed about these images of electronic power supplies, and I have been collecting them for a while. I have a lot of them on my archives. These are just some of them. This one is a more recent one. It's from 2023. It's a painting called Mental Picture of a Sunset. This painting was inspired by a lot of different things, but I think that the main idea was to illustrate the concept of a picture in a picture. Once again, we have these two elements. On the left side, this sort of electrical device with 4 extremities that correspond to the 4 basic colors that are connected to this picture of a sunset that looks like a paradisiac, utopic computer desktop kind of sunset. And you can see that the sunset is glowing a sort of aura of light, which makes it look like a screen and give it this feeling of a very artificial sunset. I picked a few images that were directly and indirectly an inspiration for this painting. They are very different from each other, as you can see, and they come from very different types of sources. There's a representation of the natural color system, which is a document that has a kind of scientific value. And then the 2 pictures on the bottom are from a very different nature, and they are much older. But I think that what they have in common is this idea of the 4 elements, which is a very old conception of the world that says that there are 4 basic elements in nature that, once combined, are the origin of all things. And from a strictly visual point of view, they look actually very close from these modern conceptions of color theory, where we also have these 4 basic concepts of color that combined are the origin of all colors. There's something I didn't tell you because I'm mainly focused on the color point of view today, but perhaps this is something important. All the paintings I'm showing you today are part of a series called Tranquility Base, in which I use a black background for all the paintings, and also the top of a Doric column as a sort of metaphysical ground. This is something that is in common to all the paintings, and it is a solution that I've found to be able to bring very different ideas from very different sources to a same common space. This one is called The Wheel of Fortune. It's a very complex one. There are a lot of different things. And you can see that this idea of having 2 objects in opposite sides connecting to each other, that I did in some paintings before, becomes something much more complex in the more recent works. Here we don't have so much this idea of opposition. It's more like a single object, but with a lot of different parts that are connected to each other to form this complex machine that functions with color, electricity, symbols, and maybe even sound. And this painting was directly inspired by Newton's color circle, the image on the top at the left. And you can see that I took exactly the same shape of Newton's color circle, and I just changed the symbols of it. There's a broken heart, the infinity symbol, a peace sign. And it was also directly inspired by the Wheel of Fortune from tarot cards, which some of you probably have seen before. And that illustrates this idea that in one's life, everything can change from one moment to another. the wheel is always turning. And someone who might be in the top of the wheel today will eventually be in the bottom when the wheel turns again. This one is really a painting by a color teacher. It is called Color Vision. And it is inspired by some documents I have been collecting and studying on optics and human vision, how humans perceive color. These little shapes that you see in red, green, and blue are actually cone cells, which are one part of the cells that we have in our eyes that are sensible to light and that participate to create the perception of color through a complex communication between the eyes and the brain. And I won't be able to explain it today how the eye and the brain communicate to create the perception of color images. This is a complex process with different layers of cells. And I must say that even today, color vision remains kind of controversial among scientists. We are not 100% sure that we completely understand how it works. But it is definitely the kind of pictures that I love, because the more you try to understand it, the more you become conscious of its complexity. I would like to give a few words now about the color class, in which I'm an assistant professor at La Cambre. The main professor of this color course is Christophe Lepeau. And this class is, in a way, the heritage of Joseph Albert's color theory class at the Black Mountain College. Christophe Lepeau, with whom I work, was the assistant of one of the assistants of Joseph Albers. So this color class is actually very old basis. There are things that we still keep today from Joseph Albers' methods, but of course a lot of things have also changed since then. There is an historical and scientific part where we talk about how the understanding of color has evolved through history and how the human eye and the brain works to perceive color. There are some authors and documents that we like to analyze with students, such as Ludwig Wittgenstein remarks on color, and Michel Chevreuil's simultaneous contrast theory. But the main part of this course is very, very visual. We work with color samples, as you can see in the picture at the right, with which we do all sorts of exercises. And the goal is really to become more and more critical and precise about what we see, and also about how we talk about color, the vocabulary that goes with it. And I showed you previously an image of the natural color system, which is an important color space that we use as a reference for the course. But there is also Munsell color system, which I think for the ones among you that are regulars to this color talks, you must have seen this image a few times already. I will not go into details about it, but I just wanted to evoke these three words that are the three basic words to describe color, and which are, of course, one of the bases of our course, which are value, hue, and chroma. I would like to give you some technical details now about how I work and how I choose my colors. And for that, I will use this painting, which is, by the way, a kind of afterlife self-portrait. This is a picture from the moment when I was finishing this painting. And you can see on the walls these black papers that I use as tryouts when I'm searching for the right colors to use. This is sometimes a very long process, and it happens that I spend several days just trying to find the right colors before I'm actually ready to paint. But what I would really like to show is this auras that I paint around the objects. And here you can see the colors that I use for this to create this illusion as if the objects were glowing their own light, as if the objects were by themselves a source of light. I think I have a close-up of this where you can see it better. But this is not something that I do all the time for all the paintings. Sometimes actually I do the opposite. As you can see in this particular painting, in this case, the auras around the objects are actually darker than the black background. And you can see that there are two different blacks on the background. One that is slightly orange and lighter, and the other that is closer to the objects, around the objects, that is slightly bluish and darker. And this is not only a matter of color, there is also a difference in shine. The darker black that is close to the objects is a super matte paint, while the other one is a semi-matte paint. So when the light in the room illuminates the painting, these two blacks behave in a very different way comparing to one another. This super matte paint absorbs much more of the light than the semi-matte paint, creating this illusion of a three-dimensional space. And you don't really notice these details, and at the beginning, when you look at a painting from the distance, you have to get close to actually perceive it. And we also have a chapter about this in our color course at La Cambre, where we like to show a variation of the same color in gloss and matte. For some colors, this can really change the perception we have of the color. For these two examples, I used each time the same exact pigment for the matte and for the gloss version. And you can see that particularly on the black, this difference is really huge. The matte black doesn't look black next to the other, it looks gray. Because the way the light is reflected on a matte and on a gloss paint is very, very different. And I mean, can we even say that it is still the same color? In a way, yes, it is the same color, but on the other way, it looks like a completely different color. And I like to talk about this because I think that a lot of painters don't take this into account when creating their paintings. To me, the difference between gloss and matte is as important as the difference between red and blue. This is also part of the color, and this is something that a painter should be able to control and take decisions on. I know that a lot of painters solve this problem by simply applying a varnish on their paintings at the end, so everything shines the same way. But me personally, I hate varnish, particularly gloss varnish. It really, when I go to a museum, it really drives me mad when I'm unable to look at a painting because all I can see is either my own reflection, either the reflection of the light bulbs on the room. And this is particularly problematic for dark colors, where the painting becomes almost like a mirror. And I didn't tell you previously, but all the paintings I'm showing you today are made with acrylic paint. I only work with acrylics for several years now, and something that is really amazing with acrylics is that you have so many choices in different products that you can really be able to control how your painting will look for all kinds of aspects. For example, in this picture, there's two different blacks, one gloss and one matte, and also a medium that I often mix on my paints to make them more or less shining. Another aspect about choosing color is what we call simultaneous contrast. And I choose this ongoing picture of this painting to try to show you this. The perception we have of a specific color on two different backgrounds sometimes may be very, very different. For example, in this case, I was trying to find the right color for the skin tone, and it was very difficult because as I had this pink rectangle on the back of the head, all my colors looked much more greener than they did on a black background, because green is somehow the complementary color of pink. And I have this little demonstration on the right that you can see. You can see that the same oblique bar that has the same color in both cases looks different because of the background that is behind it. So in this case, for the skin tones, I had to add some pink on my paint to be able to get the perception of the color as I had imagined it. And there's this one that I'd like to show you now. This is one of the simplest that I did from this series. It's almost a minimalist one. And the reason I wanted to show you this one, even if there is not much thing to say about it, well, I showed you examples in some other paintings of how I use color in a very meaningful, sometimes even symbolic way. I also showed you examples of how sometimes I use color in a more realistic way, but this one is still something else. Sometimes a color is just a color. A spot of paint is just a spot of paint. It doesn't necessarily describe or symbolizes something other than itself. And so this is the moment where color becomes its own subject. It is not a tool, it is the subject itself. A painting about painting. And this is something that has been fascinating me for a while. And what I like about it is that despite that, I can still not say that this is an abstract painting. These spots of paint are in a space. They are subject to gravity. And because they stand on this base, they look like objects, even if they don't represent nothing else than themselves. And regarding this, there's this quote by Walter Swinnon that I like a lot. If what you need is a yellow spot, why paint a lemon? So this is the last painting I'm going to tell you about. It is called The Cosmic Blues. It's from 2023. And I think it's one of my personal favorites for the moment, but it's also one of the more difficult to explain and to talk about. So for this one, I will use the words of someone else to help me with it. And this is a song by Charles Brown called A Virus Called the Blues. It seems the blues will never leave me. It seems the blues will never go away. I've been so downhearted since my love and I have parted, but the blues keep coming back. I caught the blues when my baby left me. Oh yes, I'm so blue. All alone and confused, all alone I detected that I was infected with a virus called the blues. I went to the doctor to get me some relief. I told him all about you, baby. I walked the floor, my heart was in grief. I told him what you mean to me. He said, "Go home, Charles, go home. I have no good news. There's nothing I can do for you. You don't need no narcotics, no antibiotics. You got a virus called the blues." So, the blues, having the blues, what kind of color are we talking about here? What do I mean when I say, "Oh, I'm so blue"? Is this specific to English language? Does it has this some meaning in other languages? And which blue is this exactly? Is this a light blue, a dark blue, a turquoise blue, a violet blue? It's difficult to say. What is the nature of this color? It's not a painted color. It's not even a visual color. It's an invisible color, a conceptual color. It means something. And this is where I wanted to arrive with this presentation. A color is somehow a content of meaning. It is full of meaning, even if sometimes it is an abstract meaning. And this is what makes it such a powerful tool for artists to communicate ideas. A color is not just a quality of things, not just a visual description of an object. It can really be an object of meaning itself, just like words. And I don't think I would be able to explain the meaning of this painting, or at least to explain the meaning that it has to me, to someone that never listened to the blues. I'd like to show you one last picture now, and then I stop talking. I forgot to show you this one. Yeah, it was a studio view from the moment I was finishing it. Yeah, this is the last picture that I would like to show you. This is an illustration by Saul Sternberg for the cover of the March 18, 1969 edition of the New Yorker. And I really wanted to finish today's talk with this picture because it was the image that gave me the idea for the title of this presentation, A Color in My Mind. So in this illustration, we see someone in a museum that is looking to a George Braque's painting. And as he's looking to this painting, we can see what goes in his head by this huge cloud of thought that occupies almost the entire space. And you can see his line of thought begins with the word Braque, and it continues through all kinds of associations. And at some point it arrives at Kokoschka, and Kokoschka becomes a K. But then the K becomes a shape of a K. And then the shape becomes a three-dimensional shape of a K. And then it becomes a colorful shape. And then it becomes a color. And then the color becomes an American flag and a mixture of other shapes and other colors to become a word again. The word black written in black, but also the word blue written in yellow and the word yellow written in blue. And then the line of thought continues through words again. I love this image. I think that it really expresses what color is to me. And I think that this picture is somehow very close from what I was trying to do in the mind map that I showed you at the very beginning of this talk, which allows me to kind of close the circle and go back to the beginning. So this is it. I think I said everything I had planned, and I think time is up now anyway. So I will stop sharing my screen, and then if you have questions, I will be glad to give them an answer or to try to give them an answer.
Thank you very much, Pedro. It was a very interesting talk you gave. Yeah,
Maybe Ines, I will first say a few words because I stopped recording. So
Yeah, right.
Ines will take over the questions and answers in a minute. You can also just address the questions yourself, of course. We really would like to, on behalf of Pedro and Ines and Maya, we would like to thank you for attending this very colorful color talk. And we would like to invite you. The next one is January the 28th. It will be art again, but art in a very different urban settings, very big and very beautiful. For the rest, I would like to invite you to become a sponsor member of ICA-Belgium for only 45 euros for 2024 to keep our very low costs, but we still have to keep on going a little bit. So really like to invite you for that. And next week, I will give a color talk myself with Bert Bergström about color design principles. So if you would like to attend, just send me a mail and I send you the link for that. So thank you very much and enjoy your Sunday. And I stop recording now and give the microphone to Ines.